Perhaps the earliest Trey-Riddle interaction we see is shortly after Riddle becomes house warden in his first year at NRC. When Trey recommends that Riddle dial it back a little, Riddle responds, "You're soft," blaming Trey and the other upperclassmen for the state of the dorm, of which he does not approve. Riddle calls Trey soft at least twice in the game, also telling him that he must learn to scold negligent students in a vignette. In Book 1, Trey says, "I know he can come off a bit harsh, but he's not a bad guy. As long as you are following the rules, Riddle isn't so scary." When Riddle goes into a rage about Ace's chestnut tart, Trey tries to take responsibility, having only memorized the first 350 of the Queen's rules, but Riddle refuses to blame anyone but Ace. Trey does not interfere, ejecting Ace and the others from the dorm when Riddle orders him to do so. When Kater asks if he is really alright with Riddle's actions, Trey says that there is nothing he can do. The four ejected students meet with Chenya, who encourages them to ask Trey if they want to know more about Riddle, and Deuce comments that Trey and Riddle don't seem like childhood friends. There is another scene of Riddle continuing to abuse the students of his dorm without Trey or Kater intervening, and Ace confronts Trey directly, who explains he refuses to get involved because of Riddle's abusive upbringing. After Riddle overblots, Trey reluctantly joins the fight against him, saying, "I don't want to lose him. There are too many things I've left unsaid." There is a flashback where we see one of the more traumatizing moments of Riddle's childhood was when he was forbidden from ever seeing Trey and Chenya. After Riddle wakes up, Trey apologizes for pretending not to notice his suffering, and tells him that he was wrong. Book 2 begins with Riddle apologizing for being the reason that Trey became injured trying to protect him, and will no longer be able to participate in an upcoming spell drive tournament. Trey blames himself, saying it was stupid of him to intervene at all, when he should have known Riddle wouldn't have needed his help. At the very start of Book 4, Trey invites Riddle over to his parents' cake shop during winter break, saying, "I'm not allowed in your house, so I won't be able to bring by any cakes." But in Book 5 we learn that Riddle was unsuccessful in whatever attempts he made to try and visit Trey and Chenya. Trey and Riddle appear together briefly in Book 5 as members of the committee managing the school's culture festival. Trey is often complimenting Riddle, saying, "You always know what to say," after Riddle threatens a group of students with collars if they do not finish party preparations in time. Trey says that, while he knows it is a divisive subject, he believes that there is no one better suited to be Heartslobule's house warden than Riddle. He also says that he doesn't have much to do as vice house warden since Riddle is on top of everything, and, "I feel like I'm only here for show." But he also says, "We vice house wardens sure have it rough, so it is possible he struggles more than it seems and was just downplaying his own efforts to make Riddle look good." Trey says to Riddle outright in a vignette, "Not everyone is as perfect as you." Riddle says that he questions whether or not Trey's attitude is best for Heartslobule as a whole, and Trey says, "You're right. I'll try harder to act more like you and the Queen of Hearts from now on." Trey is often telling Riddle to settle down, throughout multiple vignettes, events, and the main story. Riddle pressures Kater into supervising unexperienced underclassmen in the kitchen during the Wish Upon a Star event to give Trey a break from cooking, but they struggle until Trey lends a hand. Riddle becomes angry with Kater for giving the busy Trey more work to do, and Kater apologizes, but Trey intervenes, ultimately turning the situation into a way to grant his own star-sending wish of receiving a food processor for the dorm, by convincing Riddle to amend the dorm's budget. When inexperienced first-year students attempt to make a cake for the dorm's unbirthday party, Trey physically intervenes with an angry Riddle by grabbing onto his arm, insisting that a cake created from the students brainstorming together, even a failed cake, is emblematic of Heartslobule. Trey says, "And really, isn't that what matters?" And Riddle responds, "No, not in the least." When a Heartslobule student goes to Trey for help with tablecloths, Riddle threatens to take off his head for daring to trouble Trey with such a trivial matter. Trey tells Rook about strawberries he is growing specifically to use in a tart for Riddle, and Rook comments, "Such profound loyalty," and though Trey says, "Riddle and I go way back, so I happen to know what he likes." "That's all there is to it," Rook insists, "from where I'm standing, your bond appears to go far deeper than that," and tells him not to go breaking any hearts. Trey gives the strawberries intended for Riddle to Jade, when pressed, and asks for a strawberry tart from a famous patisserie in exchange. Rook and Jade are both suspicious, with Rook saying, "I was wondering if a strawberry tart made with your love might make Riddle happier," and Trey responds, as if. Even if Riddle considers himself a discerning critic of all things cake, his palate isn't all that refined. Jade agrees with Rook, saying, "I had Trey pegged as the type who'd rather feed Riddle homemade treats baked with love," and Trey says, "Love has nothing to do with it. My main priority is keeping my house warden from going berserk with his tyrant mode." Rook observes, "I had considered you Riddle's loyal knight, but it seems I erred a bit in my perception." Despite disparaging Riddle's sense of taste behind his back, when Trey presents the tart to Riddle, he says that he can only hope it suits his palate. Much as Trey explained, Riddle does seem to consider himself a connoisseur of sorts, saying, "Well, I have had my fair share of strawberry tarts." When Riddle deigns to try the store-bought tart, Trey says, "You honor me." We see Trey go to even greater lengths to keep Riddle from raging in a vignette where he pressures a resistant cater into using his unique magic to color roses red, while he keeps Riddle from arriving at the dorm before the roses are ready. Trey distracts Riddle by asking questions about the imminent welcome party, successfully convincing Riddle that he is just so apprehensive that he must confirm details such as whether or not the tableware they have prepared is satisfactory. Trey's lie is never revealed, and the vignette ends with Trey reflecting, "Well, we managed to avoid having Riddle explode in a blaze of anger, so I'd call today a success." Trey comes close to calling off rehearsals for the Wish Upon a Star performance due to impending inclement weather, but he agrees with the point that, if the weather clears up and they haven't practiced the dance enough, Riddle will have their heads, once again making Riddle's mood his main motivation. In a chat we learn that Trey will even take on extra tasks like tending to the dorm's roses in order to keep Riddle happy, as he would rather increase his workload than endure Riddle's wrath. Trey also runs interference with Riddle's anger during Wish Upon a Star when Riddle wishes for Hartslobule to soundly crush the other dorms with their scores on the next exams. Trey asks why Riddle isn't wishing for himself, and Riddle says he will take the top spot with or without some silly wish, leading Trey to apologize for insinuating otherwise. When Riddle reveals his plan for rounding up below-average students and trapping them inside the dorm until they are able to ace a quiz of his own design, Trey looks startled, but his only response is a quiet, "Here's hoping Riddle's wish comes true, for all our sakes." When Vil tells Trey that he is an exceptional second-in-command to Riddle, Trey says that he just doesn't want to lose his head, and that he does not get stressed out over Riddle. Vil is suspicious of this claim. Trey seems to subconsciously reference Riddle without realizing it, though students such as Sebek, Ace, Jade and even Kalim pick up on it. When Trey tells Sebek that, getting upset and flying completely off the handle is not a productive way to approach an emergency situation, Sebek scolds him for criticizing Riddle, though Trey insists that that was not his intent. In reference to his neglected flying carpet, Trey tells Kalim that, no one likes feeling unappreciated, and Kalim responds by asking him if Riddle has not been appreciating Trey enough, encouraging Trey to talk it out with Riddle directly. Trey responds, "That was either really thick of you or incredibly perceptive." When Trey lectures first-year students who had been unsatisfied with his cakes, he says, "You have to account for every potential mishap and have an action plan to adapt to issues as they arise. That's why things are done in a certain, samey way. Maintaining the peace is no easy task." Ace comments, "Just to be clear, you are talking about baking, right? 'Cause it sounds like you're talking about the house warden." And when Trey asks Jade if it doesn't stress him out to always have to choke down his own opinions, Jade follows with, "I see we're both saddled with egocentric companions and suffer from their whims." Kater exists in a strange place in the Riddle-Trey dynamic, and he seems aware of it. He tells Lilia that Trey jilted him in favor of assisting Riddle in Book 5, and he asks Trey outright if pampering Riddle isn't exhausting. Trey shares the story of the time his entire family was lectured for 5 hours by Riddle's mother, a backstory that was changed in the EN adaptation to make it so that Trey has never actually endured Riddle's mother at all, explaining that he felt extra guilty when he thought about how Riddle was getting reamed even worse than he was. Kater points out that Trey has always been on the long-suffering side, even as a child, but Trey says that Kater would be the same if he'd ever met Riddle's mother, and that he is just glad to see Riddle light up the way he does when he gets to eat sweets. Kater confirms that Riddle's mood always skyrockets when he gets one of Trey's tarts. Kater comments, "I dunno if you're an amazing cook or just way too devoted to Riddle." In a chat, Kater compares Trey and Riddle to the King and Queen of Hearts, saying, "As far as Heartslobule's concerned, you guys are both #indispensable." There is an EN server-only line about Trey being closer to Riddle than he is to Kater, but this is something Trey has never actually said. His original line is closer to saying that he is an ally to them both. When Riddle becomes enraged at Kater for failing to memorize a multi-page study guide, Trey takes Riddle's side, scolding Kater with, "Put some effort into your memorization. Our house warden took a lot of time out of his busy schedule to make this for you." We see Trey go to Riddle's assistance with tutoring Kater, walking Riddle through the thought process to come up with a more effective study method than rote memorization and teaching Riddle how to use Magicam, by request. We see Trey defend Riddle's poor behavior again during Halloween, when Riddle threatens laypeople with magic, saying, in Riddle's defense, he was exercising a lot of restraint. He knew he was dealing with guests. When Rook asks Trey about his excitement at the prospect of encountering Riddle during Beanfest, Trey says, "I've never been gung-ho about competing with Riddle." When Kater says that, "It's the guys who act all harmless that you really gotta watch out for," Riddle agrees, and then ends up getting caught by Trey himself. Trey says he did not do anything special. Kater says that he can only imagine how many times Trey's baking has saved the rest of the dorm from Riddle's rages, and Trey does seem to cook for him often. Trey picks up dried pineapples, oranges, kiwis, bananas, melon and dates during the Firelit Sky event that he says are all for Riddle, as he intends to use them to make him a tart. When reunited with all 5 members of Heartslobule during Spectral Soiree, Trey is the first person that Riddle calls out to. When Ace comments on how he doubts that Trey was that serious about studying from day one, Trey says, "When I knew Riddle was coming the year after me? Of course I was. Could you imagine what he would have said if I'd flunked any one of my classes?" Which does not seem to track with a different comment by Trey, that Riddle didn't have a reputation for getting angry before enrolling at NRC. He tries to give Riddle a pass for his behavior by saying that, maybe he's just feeling the pressure of responsibility now that he's house warden. Trey is often taking on a supportive role to Riddle as vice house warden, keeping his opinion to himself when he does not agree with Riddle's comments. We also see Trey visiting Riddle in his room for the sole purpose of fetching a stack of documents to deliver to the head mage, and telling Riddle not to work too hard, to which Riddle responds, "Trey always was a worrier." Ace says that the moment Riddle calls Trey's name he appears in order to fix the problem. He doesn't even have to tell you what it is. You're practically superhuman. When Riddle reacts with shock to the idea that his tsum looks anything like him, Deuce says, "It's kind of intense," and Trey diffuses a potential situation by insisting, "It has a certain dignity about it." When Riddle comments on how cold Trey's dorm room is, Trey counters with concern for Riddle himself, to which Riddle responds, "Even now, you worry about me?" Really, Trey, you ought to think about yourself for once. Riddle decides to try and help a sick Trey feel better by making him soup, but unfortunately runs into Lilia, who recommends adding strawberry tarts, ginger, garlic, eggs, bananas and yogurt to the mix. Riddle lets thoughts of Trey guide him as he cooks, and the end result is something with a rather pungent odor. Trey insists on trying the soup in front of Riddle, and compliments him on his effort. Later, he assures Riddle that he ate the whole batch. Riddle responds, "You're an utter fool, you know that."